Well, I guess we will call to order the virtual BZA meeting, May 7th, 2020. Vicki, if you would call roll.
Okay, Mrs. Can y'all hear me, Mrs. Smith? Ms. LaBeouf?
Here.
Mr. Cole?
Here.
Mr. Foley?
Here.
Mr. Jarman?
Here.
Mr. Marlin?
Here.
And Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Okay, thank you. We have meeting minutes from February 7th, 2019, September 5th, 2019, January 9th, 2020, February 6th, 2020, March 5th, 2020. We could have a motion to approve these minutes.
I move we approve the minutes with any corrections submitted to Ms. Bridges for typos.
I'll second. This is Stuart Roberts.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, no opposition. Minutes are approved with Ms. LaBeouf's comments. Okay. So before we go any further, we just wanted as a board to recognize Ms. Bridges for her hours and hours of years and years of work on the BZA. She made our volunteer jobs a little bit easier, and we just wanted to voice our appreciation for her. Okay, next up, if there are no communications from the vice chair, we will get moving. None. Okay, so I'm assuming old business is still carried over. We got word this morning that the first case, SV 20-04-01, for 111 Fern Street is being carried over due to the applicant's wishes. So we will move on to case number 2, which is SV 20-04-02, which is 1414 Roseland Drive. Is the applicant
Hi.
for that case? Yes.
This is Liz Montgomery. I don't know how to make my face show up, so sorry. Yes, it is a corner lot on the corner of Roseland Drive and East Linwood.
Liz, Ms. Montgomery, would you mind stating your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, Liz Montgomery. I live at 306 Poinciana Drive, but I own 1414 Roseland Drive as well.
Okay, you can continue on with your case, please.
Okay, we are wanting to build a house on that corner lot, and we have submitted the variances that are needed. I believe Greg Cobb said that if we kept the existing variances, our house would be 15 feet wide. We had requested a variance for this exact same thing several years ago, and it was approved. And then anyway, life happened and we were not able to go through with the building on it. So we are requesting it once again. I believe Greg said you have all the information. Is that correct?
We have what appears to be a survey with a new outline of a foundation of a house.
Okay.
And your submission sheet that says you are requesting a Linwood Street setback and a left side setback.
Correct.
Okay, if that, yeah, I'm not either. If that is it, we will open the public portion of this to any public comments.
And as of right now, you have Max Austin.
Okay, is Max Austin available?
Hey, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? Are we good?
Yes, we can. If you would mind
Okay.
stating your name and address
Sure.
for the record and whatever
Sure.
comments you want to have.
Yeah, my name is Max Austin. I live at 1412 Roseland. I've lived here for 20 years. I live right next door to this property that we're talking about, 1414 Roseland. Just wanted to ask a few questions. I've seen some some renderings and things of the floor plan that have been sent to me, and I'm sure it'll be a nice home. All that. Obviously, my home is a bungalow, one story, one level. So my concern is partly just it being overbuilt. If it's going to be, a corner lot, I know that has some unique circumstances, but I will say the variance that Liz referred to from, I believe it was 2013, and I have some information on it too that I had kept. It's not the exact same thing. I'll say, just to clarify from what I'm seeing. Yes, the 5.5 or the 19.5 foot variance request on the East Linwood side is there, but they also on the left side, which basically is between my house and this one, was moved to 10 feet. And I believe the variance should be 9 feet based on the zoning. So there's 9 feet from this property in theory to the property line, and then 5 feet to mine. That's the way you can see that, I guess, on some of the survey or the drawing that was submitted with the application. It's actually right now on the corners, it's at 7 feet. When you go out and measure, I mean, as me measuring without a survey, license and whatnot, it's basically 7 feet as it is right now. And my concern is just that it's already below the zoning that's required now, and it's just it's going to be a big home. It's going to basically eclipse ours. We're not going to have any morning sun and all those things. But another concern I just have is a question, and I don't know if there's even tree ordinances in the city of Homewood, but I mean, there's going to be a lot of trees taken down. The previous project did not have the garage and everything extending towards the back. From 2013, not that that's really what we got to go by, but I was, got the information on that one, and this one just seems a lot bigger. Just want to voice the concerns also about the runoff from the property. Both lots and the lot behind us off the alley that we're all touching properties. Basically, it's sloped, so there is some runoff concern that I guess I want it to be at some point hopefully addressed, and that a lot of this lot is all the trees, and the landscape, the groundscape is going to be taken away. So that water's got to go somewhere. How's that going to be handled? Because we all know I'm not worried about a floodplain. We're up high. We're not in that floodplain, but we're right across the street from a number of flooding that does happen right over there by the Homewood Creek that goes by when we have the flash floods and those kind of things. And I guess with that is the front part of the house going to be built up so that it's going to be level all the way back? That's a question that I had. And then I also, they don't have any side elevations yet. I just want to clarify and make sure that the height maximum and what that would be. I'm not sure if anybody can answer that right away. I know it's a lot. Our lots are both less than 55 feet wide, so I don't know how it works with a corner lot. If it's 29 feet or if it's 35 feet as far as the maximum goes. So those are just some things I wanted to ask about and talk about. One question is on the drawing that was submitted. It looks like they're asking for the 19.5 foot variance, but the property only goes over. I can't, like at the front of the house, it says there's like a 7 foot 10 inch space from the corner of the house to the property line on East Linwood. Further back towards the garage, which is still part of the house, it looks like it's a little bit further over. I don't know the width there. So I don't know if that's where the 5.5 is. But I guess my thought would be, could it be moved over a little bit, give us a little more room between the houses, because we're already, pretty cramped as it is. that and the runoff are my two main questions, just to address.
This is Liz again. Like you said, Max, the current setback is now 7 feet. So it will still be 7 feet even after construction. So we're not asking to change what it is currently. However, the current zoning requirements are 9 feet, but it's
Right.
currently 7. So that we're asking for that just to be grandfathered in because it is what it is today already.
Mhm.
And then the height, we're not asking for a variance on the height at all. That never has come into the equation. The 5.5 setback is the 5.5 over by the garage.
Okay.
When Greg and I went through this together, I know he's not on here today, but when he and I went through it, he talked about the runoff and said that there was enough land and all that, the building isn't going to be too big for the size of the lot. That the amount of grass and the amount of natural area that you have is appropriate for this 3,300 square foot house that's going to be built. I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah, I mean, I guess because technically I know the house is contiguous with the garage, even though it's, just by the little hallway there on the east side. I guess and then I see that, I guess that's paved from the garage to the gravel driveway. Is that paved, the entire width of the garage there? Is that, I mean, that takes away, I mean, I see there's, green grass or whatever there may be landscape down the east side that's narrow, and then, where the courtyard is and things like that. I mean, I don't know anything about runoff and what square footage needs to be to be able to handle whatever it might, come. I mean, who knows what that'll be, but I mean,
well,
those are just
Greg thought he knew, and that's why when
Okay.
we did this and we went over it with him, that was one of the calculations that he did.
okay.
We will have to stay under the 50% what they call impervious rule. And then the other information I'm receiving is in terms of runoff, the lot slopes front to back to the street towards Roseland, and it also slopes towards Linwood. So that will all help with the runoff.
Mr. Austin, this is Vicky. I did the calculations for the square footage, right, as proposed. The lot, as Liz said, was max would be 50% of coverage. As it's proposed, it's less than 39. I believe it's 30. I can tell you, it's 37.9%.
Okay.
So it's well under the 50%.
And I understand you weren't, Liz, back to the maximum height. I guess, is there a clarification on what that maximum height is? In my mind, it's a less than 55 foot width lot. Does that mean it's, I'm just curious, how high it's going to be ish, just to.
It's going to be within whatever the allowances are. It is a 2-story house. Well, 1.5 sort of. So yeah, 1.5 story. I don't even see from my stuff exactly what the height is, but I know that the height was not an issue when we were going over it before.
Okay.
So we will stay within whatever the height is, whether it's 28, 35, whatever. I don't know what that is. Maybe somebody on the board or the BZA knows what the height is. I don't know.
Unless I'm mistaken, I believe it's either 29 or 32. I believe for lots less than 55. I think Wyatt may be on here and he would know.
Hey, Vicky, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Let's see if I can do, well, can't get my camera to work. But anyway, yes, for lots that are up to 55 feet wide, you have an allowance of 29 feet from the first finished floor elevation, or no greater than 32 feet from front grade if you have a crawl space.
And
Okay.
we plan to have a crawl space, so we will stay 32 feet or under.
Under 30, yeah, 32 feet or under from front grade.
Yes.
Okay. And as far as you know, do you think the front will be built up to, you know, or will it be dug in more the back? I mean, since it does slope, I just was curious if it's going to be, you know, that'll just make it seem higher. I know it's from the base, basically the front door sill, if you want to look at it that way, I guess from there, you know, 32 feet up. But it seems like something would have to, you know, make it where it's level all the way. Again, not critical. I mean, I know it'll be a nice home once it's all said and done. It's just we're you know, we like our quaint little Homewood house, and you know, we like our semi-private backyard, and I do, you know, have concerns of what it's going to look like as far as, you know, what we'll need to do to maintain some of that privacy, you know, going forward. But you know,
We can put a fence up there if we need to. I think a 6-foot fence, but the owner does not, I'm not really interested in having it taller in the front either. So we want to, the plan is to step the house down from the garage.
Okay.
I just can't tell you exactly how much that step down is going to be right now.
Sure. That's fine.
Yes, and Joe Ellis is the one that's doing the architect on it, and he has done lots of homes in Homewood.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, if there are no more public comments.
No, there's nobody else.
Okay. At this point in time, we'll close the public portion and open up to questions from the board.
Can you remind us what the approved or the previously approved variance was, Vicki?
I don't have that information. I don't know if it's because that predates me. I don't know if Ms. Montgomery has it or not.
I do. I was pulling it up in my file because I had to dig a little bit. Okay. It says, oh gosh, I don't know how to read all this stuff. It's similar to the one that we have now. It was, we were asking for a 10-foot on the left side, and this time it's staying at 7, just like it is today. Greg had a copy of it because I gave it to him. Let's see. I'm looking at the box that we had to complete with the front building setback, right building setback, etc. Oh, it's a little bit different the way we filled it out back then.
Yeah, we have 2 fronts now.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm going.
Only one front before. So it would be the right side.
It's basically the same, only it's actually less because it was the 5.5 was the same, 38.6 is the same. The rear setback, we didn't even have one on here. The existing house is currently right at 6 foot 8 inches, and we're going to set it back to 7 on that left side. So it's basically the same. It's actually less because we were asking for 10 on the side and it was approved, and this time we're only asking for 7. So
But
based on this survey, I don't know how you could have achieved 10 you would have built on your neighbor's property, but
this was done back in 2013.
Yeah, the setbacks were different then.
Yeah, but we're not asking for 10 now. We're only asking for the 7 that it already is.
The variance request is actually for 2 feet because the required is 9 feet and the request is to set it at 7. So the amount of the variance is 2.
Okay,
Just as on the Linwood side, because it's a corner lot, you'd have a 25-foot setback and you're setting it at 5.5, which then your variance is 19.5. It's the difference
yeah,
between the two.
that's correct.
Do you happen to know, Liz, how many trees you're gonna be cutting down on the property? I walked by it the other day and it looked like there were 6 or 7 or 8.
I couldn't hear you and you were breaking up. If somebody else heard it, please pass it on.
I'll try again, a little bit closer. I walked by this property the other day and it looked like to build this home, you're probably gonna have to cut down at least half a dozen trees. Do you know how many trees you're gonna be cutting down?
She's asking how many trees you may be cutting down on the lot.
There are a bunch of pine trees, which probably need to be coming down anyway before they land on a house. But I haven't counted them. I'm sorry. I didn't go by and count. We're going to try to leave up as many as possible. But I don't think there are any, I don't think there's any hardwoods on there at all. They're all pine trees. If there is a hardwood, there may be one.
Do you think it would be feasible to slide the house over a little bit?
Over
it seems
which
to me-
direction?
Away from your neighbor's house?
Well,
Toward Linwood.
the current house is that, the current house is sitting at 7 feet already.
Right, but the current house is probably 1,200 square feet.
Close.
Also, the current house is being torn down. I don't know that you get a credit for being grandfathered in when you're tearing down what's there.
No, we just pick one side and not all the 4. It just doesn't, I don't know. It just seems like it would be, I don't know, more neighborly to be a little bit off of him.
Well, the concern then is, she's only 5.5 feet off the right of way on the Linwood side as proposed. If you moved it 2 feet over, say, so that she didn't need a variance at all on the left, it should be 3.5 feet off of the right of way.
Well, the way I was looking at it is the garage looks like it sticks out about the same 2 feet that you're asking for on the west.
On the west side, it meets the setbacks.
I thought,
The garage does, but the rest of the house doesn't.
Right. The garage is over 12 feet off of Mr. Austin's property line. That
no, right,
12.2.
but on the Linwood side, the garage is poking out from the rest of the house.
I see, by a couple of feet. I see
So-
what you're saying.
That's where the 5.5, the 5.5 comes in because of the garage. Because at the front, it's 7 foot 10
But-
inches.
Oh, okay.
But the 2 feet that you're asking for on the neighbor side, couldn't that flip to the Linwood side?
Okay,
then-
so we'll leave it 9 on the left and just do more like maybe not exactly 5.5, but no closer than 5.5 on the right-hand side. Move the 2 feet that are too close to his house on the left to the right. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Then
We can do that.
Because I think Joe Ellis has been doing this long enough. He can
Yeah.
easily make this, this work and kind of just not be as invasive to the neighbor. And so I think that's a
Liz,
possibility.
if you lined up like where the garage wall is on Linwood and lined up the entire rest of the house along that line?
Yeah,
Would that take care of it?
that's what I'm thinking. That would take care of it because we wouldn't have to do the 2 feet on the left. It would basically move to the Linwood side instead of being beside the neighbor.
And it would
But
be
now,
a
Is
straight
that
line.
gonna be an issue being that close to the sidewalk right there? No?
Well, if the garage is sitting there anyway, and all you're really
Yeah.
doing is sliding so that the breezeway and the main house is in line with the garage, then, you know,
Am I correct? This is Stuart Roberts. Am I correct though, if we shifted the house to the right 2 feet to get further away from the neighbor, we're encroaching more on the Linwood setback. Wouldn't that require renoticing?
Well, I wasn't suggesting shifting the house. I was
Oh, okay.
suggesting mirroring the floor plan so that you're not asking for the neighbor or the left side setback variance.
Well,
Okay.
we can actually move if we get the 5.5 variance on that same side that we're on the Linwood side that we're asking for, we could shift the 2 feet that's on the left side of the house to the 2 feet on the right side, on the Linwood side, and still be within our 5.5.
Okay.
Because they've got
So I
that
wouldn't
set,
have to ask for anything different.
yeah, because the whole house is set back and the garage is pulled forward. So
Right.
if you shove the house over so that's a straight line, then you've got that 2 feet moved over.
And it looks like you got a 32-foot garage, so I don't think that 2 feet's really gonna make that much of a difference on a garage that size.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Hmm. Well, do we want to vote on it like we've decided, or should she get Joe Ellis to make some adjustments and come back?
well, you could just, if you grant the variance request on the Linwood side, but not on the side
Left.
setback, then it would allow her to go ahead and just shift it all over.
And then
That
she
is
has,
correct.
and if she had any problems with it, she could come back.
Yep.
Yeah,
That
Let's
is
try
correct.
this.
Thank you.
that makes
Ms.
sense.
Montgomery, would you like us to split the vote and just vote on one setback at a time?
Sure.
Okay.
Anybody?
There's,
All right, I move we approve BZA case SV 20-04-02, item number 1 for the 19.5 Linwood side setback.
I second.
all right, Vicky, that was Mr. Foley seconding. Vicky, you want to call the vote?
Yes, I'm ready. Okay, Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. LaBeouf,
Yes,
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Foley,
Yes.
Mr. Jarman,
Yes.
Mr. Marlin.
that's it.
Oh, that's right, I forget, sorry.
That's it.
Got it, okay.
Okay. That one is approved. We need a motion for the second setback.
I move we approve SV
Can I
20
say something?
SV 20
Beverly.
020 of, huh?
Sorry. Why are we doing that? It's 0 feet, right? We don't have to make she offered 0 feet, didn't she?
Well,
We didn't really
Still
proffer anything. We were just going to vote on it.
Well, if she was proffering to do 0 feet there on the left, we don't have to do anything.
Well, we were doing the
We did.
Linwood side. Okay, you're right. So if she's moving it, then we don't have to do a second one.
Yeah.
Change
It's-
it
it's
tonight.
always-
You're right.
She's going to stay within the 19.5 by
Correct.
shifting the house and have 0 on the left side.
Correct.
what we can do is write that up as a proffer.
Right.
To,
It's a proffer. She went to 0, but we don't have to vote
Yeah.
on 0, do we?
No,
No,
Well, no,
it-
but we didn't proffer it yet.
Okay, have her proffer.
Ms.
I'll fill
Montgomery,
out
would you
whatever
mind?
form I have to do.
We just
We
put
could
it in
do-
the record that you say yes, that you will proffer to stay within the legal setback for the left side of the
Yes.
house.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, it is so proffered. Thank you. Your right side variance request was approved. You have 180 days to pull your permit.
Thank you so very much. Austin
you.
Max will love the house that will be his neighbor.
Awesome. Okay, case number 3 will be SV 20-04-03, which is 436 Hillwood Drive. Is that applicant available?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, if you would state your name and address for the record and the nature of your hardship, please.
Yes, my name is Daniel Benkin, and we're at 436 Hillwood Drive. And the reason for our application for a variance today is in order to maintain the front setback variance to be equal to the neighbor next door. We are on a cul-de-sac lot. We're the first house on the cul-de-sac, which curvature pushes the front setback of our lot back approximately 8 feet from the neighbor's residence. And because of that pushback from the road, the rear side of our house has been, we need a 6-foot variance for the rear side of the house to stay in the front setback.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. If there's anyone that would like to speak about this case, they may do so at this time. That would mean no one. Okay, then we will.
Yeah, sorry, that's correct. There was nobody.
Okay. All right, we will close the public portion and open it up to questions from the board. Okay. So,
Okay, I'd like to ask several things. First of all, why are you're tearing it down and building a totally new house, correct?
Yeah.
Am I correct, Mr. Benkin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but you're moving the location of it, which is causing the need for the variance. Why are you
Yes,
moving
ma'am.
why are you moving the location of the house?
The current house, as it sits now, is outside of the variance, the zoning requirements. The shortest portion of the front of the house is 19 feet from the road. The next nearest house, which is to the right, if you're looking at the house, is 29.7 feet. So to remain within the code for the front setback, we've aligned our front of the house to the 29.7 feet, which has pushed us back further in the yard.
But according to the application, you only need to be at 20 feet.
that's rear.
On the rear setback,
Wait a minute. Right, but on the front, so if you put it where it is now and you couldn't get the 29 on the front.
yes, ma'am. If we put the new residence at the same footprint as the existing, we would be at 19 feet, the closest. We're pushing back 10 feet from there, so we wouldn't need a 6-foot variance on the rear side of the property.
What about building to the left?
To the left, the curvature of the cul-de-sac continues on the lot that would restrict it.
I mean about elongating the house to the left instead of to the back.
There's a slope in the yard that slopes down right there. There's a hill.
Yeah, I walked it, so I'm aware.
Okay. Well, that's why, man, we would like to put a drainage that pulls the water that's currently going into the wood property that comes down into that slope down. And we'd like to divert the water coming off of that hill. And if we go any further than the house currently sits, I'm afraid that we might get into the water situation.
I'm just concerned that you're so much higher than the house behind you. You know, and that close, you're going to be right looking into their backyard. You know, I mean, I know it doesn't look like it on here, but if you go out and walk it, you can see how.
Yeah, it's pretty tight in the back.
Yeah.
I understand it, and the request on the 6 feet is for just a covered porch, so it's not a part of the actual HVAC area.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, covered but open so that you can see more. You know, that's just my problem is you're sitting up there surveying everything, you know, and being able to look over into the neighbor's yard. Even more so than you would be if you were pulled back some or shifted over.
Mr. Benkin, do you have a dimension from where the new house would be to the neighbor that is on the other, to your rear there? Well, there's actually kind of two, but primarily one. Do you have a dimension maybe to that house?
Which dimension would you be looking for, Miss Vicky?
The one from where your proposed house is to the rear of the house behind you.
No, ma'am, I don't have that dimension.
I don't have a way of measuring it, but I was just curious.
If I may, I hate to step in just for a second. We did have somebody from the public who did want to speak, and they answered just as you closed. Do you want to be able to, you know, obviously in this forum, it's a little bit odd. Do you want to let them speak?
Yeah, we can let them speak. We can reopen the public portion for the one.
All right, Matthew Willett.
Yes, we're here.
Okay, if you'll state your name and address for the record and any comments you want to have about the.
Yes, I'm Matthew Willett. My wife, she's here as well, Sarah Willett, and we live at 1031 Edgewood Boulevard, just to the rear of the property in question.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so as far as the whether they can see us, that's not an issue. we were good friends with the neighbors before because they are looking right into our kitchen, so that's not an issue. We are mainly concerned, and we've talked to Dan and Amy about this, just about how the drainage, the water coming off of the property is into our lot is going to be addressed. And we also have a stone wall that's kind of crumbling, and so we just need to know what the plan is for that. The stone wall is between the end of their lot and ours, and the house next door.
If you're looking from their property, you the house to the right or the left?
To the right.
So no,
No, looking at
from their property to the left.
Oh, I'm sorry. From their property.
Okay, on the left side. Okay, yeah, so you're in the little ravine he was talking about.
Correct.
Okay. Well, if that is
To
it,
answer
we'll,
that, should I answer that, Brian, or?
let me just close the public portion and you can just address their concerns. Okay, we'll close the public portion and open up to, you're very welcome. Open up to questions. If you want to go ahead and respond to that, Mr. Bacon, that'd be fine.
Yeah, thanks, Matt and Sarah, for joining and for your comments. And like I mentioned before, we contacted both our general contractor and a landscape company to address the concern on the water. It's both in our best interest to that situation right now, and as it has been since the current or the previous owner owned the house, the water's been free flowing through that little ravine. We've got 4 children and we'd like to have a nice backyard. And so as we spoke to Matt and Sarah yesterday, we're going to get a French drain installed and divert that water into the ravine that goes through their yard and ultimately down to Edgewood. So we have plans to correct that situation. Additionally, I will say this, the house that was sitting on there prior to it did not have gutters our house plan, we will have gutters, so we'll have more control on the water that's coming off the house and can direct that water to the proper location it needs to go.
I've got a couple of questions. This is Ty. Since this is a new house, I don't understand why, why we can't probably design it. One, the porch definitely could get a little narrower. You were saying that only the porch is what this is about, but if we line the porch out with the back of the house, it'd also be off just a bit from the 20 feet as well. It'd still be off about 2.1 feet. But, to the right, there is still some room for you to go to the right because it's not quite as far as what the existing house is when I compare the two site plans, existing versus new, that they're obviously you've taken some of the house down that is a little bit further to the left than what you're building back. So it seems like there still would be room to move some things to the left. Definitely you could elongate it more of a rectangle for the porch. Maybe get out of the 20 feet and not even have to be before the board. I mean, it's a new house, so it's just lines on paper right now.
I understand. And part of the way that we situated the house was to stay away from the neighbor to the right that you're talking about moving closer to. And I think the rear setback, the way that it sits is, I think we don't have the measurements on the lot directly behind us, but that lot does sit quite a bit further back on there. So the way it sits now, we didn't think it was going to be too intrusive on the rear neighbors.
Any more questions from the board members?
We ready?
I think so.
I move we approve BZA case SV-20-04-03.
I second.
Ms. Vicky, we have a motion and a second.
Matt that made the second.
Yes.
Okay, just checking. Okay. Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. LaBeouf,
No.
Mr. Cole,
No.
Mr. Foley,
Yes.
Mr. Jarman.
Yes. Okay. I believe that was 4.
No, it was a 3-2.
Oh. Oh. Okay. That is not approved. I'm sorry, the variance was not approved.
Ryan, can I chime in here? We didn't speak about reducing the variance. Is there any way that we could go for less of a variance on this one and re-vote?
I mean,
I know y'all did that for the last one where you came in a little bit.
Yeah, but that was kind of before we had went ahead and voted. I don't know, but Vicki, what have we done in this case like this before? We just say no or move.
Well, I don't know that somebody couldn't make a motion that you approve something lesser.
Mm-hmm.
We would
just
make something lesser like Mr. Cole has said about lining up the house along with the 17.9.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to just move him to the back and then take everybody else, and then we'll re-up this?
Now that's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'd have to approve a motion to reopen it.
Well, you only closed the public comment, correct?
No, we voted.
Well, I know. You had a motion, you had a second, and you voted. What if you had an alternative motion and a second and a vote? I don't know why you can't do that.
Well, technically, according to Roberts, it's done. So we'd have to, decide to open it back up and vote again. But we'd have to know what he wanted us to vote on, I guess. I mean, we can't vote on something less than X.
True. I was just thinking, my thought was that you could have a secondary motion. I made a motion to, block, and then the next motion would be I make, a motion to approve a 2-foot variance or, something different than what was less than what was asked for. But yes, you'd have to have a number in mind. You can't leave that open.
If we could keep the number at the 17.9 setback, we would be requesting a 2.1 foot variance versus a 6 foot variance.
Right. It would be the 2.1. Yes. But you're the chairman, Mr. Jarman. So if you want to do it now or move it to the end.
It doesn't sound like this is going to take very long. If anyone wants to make a motion to reopen this. Or a secondary motion, as Ms. Vicky called it. Okay, it doesn't sound like anyone wants to make a motion. This has not happened before. So in this case, if no one makes a motion, we don't bring it back up. Is that, as I understand it? You muted yourself.
So sorry. Try not to leave it on. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a motion to open it back up, then you'll just have to move on.
Okay. Rick, I'm sorry about that, but we are going to move on. Your variance was not approved. Did we lose everybody?
No, we're all here.
I'm still here.
Okay.
No, we're all here.
Okay. Okay.
We're all here.
Okay. All right. Then we're moving on to the next case. Let's see. Case number 4. SV 20-0404. It's 508 Kenilworth Drive.
Yes, this is Caleb Haynes, 508 Kenilworth Drive, and Sarah Haynes at 508 Kenilworth Drive. Well, hi, everybody.
Hi. Is this the one that we got a revised calculation on today? Yeah, it is. The problem, I believe, is they're going to end up needing more of a variance than was advertised.
I'm aware of a revised calculation delivered today.
Yeah, well, what happened is there was an error in the calculations that was sent to me by our GIS lady Hannah, and she said that when she did the original calculations, she tossed out the oversized lot, but forgot to reduce the number of homes going, you divide the area by the number of homes. And, okay, so when she redid it, you're going to need 4,066 square feet variance and a 60-foot width variance. But, because when you throw out the biggest lot, you're supposed to throw out the smallest lot as well. So when she redid all of that, and I don't know who was in the office today. I'm working from home. I don't know, did any of the board members get that recalculation?
I did not.
No.
I did not.
Well, the original one, they're requesting, let me get back up to theirs. They're requesting 652 square feet and 18.5 feet of lot width at the building line. But when she took out the largest one, then she went back and took out the smallest one and divided by the number of homes, the average lot size is like 20,000 square feet and a lot width of 111 square feet based on what, tossing out the largest one, of course, helped you, but to balance it, the code says you're supposed to take out the smallest one as well. One, two, let me make sure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, yeah, 9 houses, and that's what she used. The total number of the area in the impact area is 109,275 square feet and 9 houses. And when you do the math, the average lot width at the building line for those are 85 feet and 12,142 square foot of lot size. It's basically, gosh, see, and I just got this today, but we tossed out 506 being the smallest and 511 being the large, oversized one. But you still had 5, 12, 10, and 12, which are, significant size. All the other ones are, well, 507 is kind of big too. So it's thrown your calculations out of line with the ones to the other side of you, the 506 for the 501. But those are all smaller lots, and you probably would have come closer to meeting those, but the ones on the other side of you are all larger than average, and it makes you not be able to meet the 100, 2 lots of 100% of this average.
So is there a way that I can share my screen? Is that allowed?
Well, we can see you.
Well, the host is actually, I've got a spreadsheet up. I can't replicate that quickly your exact recalculation because I didn't catch the smallest one that they threw out. But the basis of our ask was that while we do understand the intent of the calculation and the results of the calculation, that because of where our lot is situated in a very much a transition zone due to the geography of the lot and the historical development, I believe, of our neighborhood up to and including our house, the calculation, the way it is written, and understand the way it's written, the calculation places an undue hardship on us to be able to further the intent of the Neighborhood Preservation District, which is to promote the homogeneous development of our neighborhoods. And I believe that will accomplish that. And I've got some alternate calculations that help support that argument that I would like to share with the committee.
Well, the only thing, and I'm not trying to run away with it, Mr. Drummond, but the problem is we advertised a certain amount of square footage and a certain linear feet to the public. And now it appears that the variance would be a different number and a greater number. So because of that, I mean, you may be able to justify it perfectly, but the problem is that we advertised one thing and it's going to have to be something else.
So basically, we'll have to re-advertise to the public and carry it over till the next meeting is basically what you're saying.
Right. Even if you granted everything he asked for, it's not going to bring him up to the minimums that on the new calculation.
Oh yeah, it's about 1,400 square feet difference on the lot area,
Mm-hmm.
at least by my math. Oh, okay.
And I apologize, Mr. Haynes, not being in the office. I feel like sometimes, I'm on outer space, but I knew this had come in today, but I didn't realize that it hadn't been shared with you. Of course, it wouldn't have changed the advertisement, but.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, if you would, obviously, put a lot of time. You all put a lot of time and effort into everything that you do for this committee. I noticed several of you swing by the house, and we have too. I'd like to at least have a discussion, I guess, around the ask of the variance. I understand that we'll have to come back officially with an advertisement, but I would at least like to maybe entertain a conversation among the committee to hear the thoughts and to understand whether this is a valid, whether the committee even considers this.
Okay, that
may be odd as well. And if you tell me no, we can certainly come back next month.
Yeah, I would certainly like to, but with this many cases on the docket, and we're not looking to vote anyway, it's just not. It's just not. I think a good use of time at this point.
Yep, certainly understand. We'll look forward to reconvening with you again next week.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get some actual correct numbers next time. That way we don't have to waste any more of your time.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so we will carry this over until the next meeting. Okay. All right, the next case. Wait, Vicki, do I need to make a motion to carry that over, or we just carry it over?
I think it'd be cleaner if y'all made the motion to carry it over. I don't know it's necessary, but I'd rather err on the side of caution.
Okay, can someone give me a motion to carry over this case?
I'll do it. I move we carry over BZA case SV-20-04-04 for a correct writing of the needed variance.
I'll second it. This is Ty.
All right, thank you, Mr. Booth. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Case number 5, SV 20-0405.
Wait a minute, we had to vote, didn't we?
Oh, I guess. Thank you, Ty. Appreciate you. Okay, Ms. Vicki, if you will.
Well, it's tough. I can't nudge you when we're not next to each other.
Okay. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. LeBeau?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Jarman?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Cullen, I can't box you in this way.
Yes. Okay. Moving on again. Case SV 20-0405, 213 La Prado Place. Is that applicant available? Mr. Long.
Sorry. Yes, I'm here trying to unmute. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. If you could state your name and address and the nature of your hardship, please.
Yes, Richard Long. I am presenting on behalf of the homeowner, Josh Jones, who I think is also with us tonight. 213 La Prado Place. What we are requesting is a variance to the property line, the side property line to the east. And in doing so, we're required 10 feet, and the existing house home is roughly 5 feet from the side property line. And so we simply want to, in an effort to get a master bedroom on the main level and put the kids' bedrooms upstairs, we need to add a bedroom on the back side of the house that would be a basically convert to a 2-story. And that runs about 18 feet from the existing back corner of the house. So we're requesting a 2nd-story addition that's about 18 feet front to back to this back with the existing side of the house. So that would be roughly 5 feet from the property line. And in addition to that, a porch addition. So it would be 1 story on the back of the house. Again, would be in line with the existing side of the house. We're adding on 1-story addition all the way across the back of the house, but we're only over the 10-foot setback on that east side. So our goal has been to keep it 1 story where possible. The home already has a 2nd story, but we just wanted to keep the existing scale and charm of the house. And we've also consulted with the neighbor to the east for their approval, which we got confirming that they are fine with the 5-foot setback area.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. This is a public hearing. If anyone would like to speak about this, they may do so at this time.
We have nobody that has signed up to speak for this item.
Okay, in that case, we will close the public portion. We will open up from 2 questions from the board.
I've got a question. Can you speak to the garage, I guess, is coming down, and how much of the concrete driveway might be taken away and where people are parking?
Yeah, the plan is for the garage to be demolished, as you said, which currently they're using for storage. It's a pretty tight spot. They're not able to park in it, but the driveway does extend to the rear of the home. The plan is to continue to be able to park in the rear of the home, past a little gate that they're going to have. But currently they park in the driveway. What we're proposing that is not on this submittal, but we're proposing guest parking in the front, 1 parking spot. We're well within our lot coverage. I think we may have an option to do guest parking instead of doing a gravel pad. But if we do in fact go over the what would be allowed in the rear, we would simply do a gravel motor court to allow for additional cars to park.
Did I understand that you said that you'll be able to drive past the new addition to the backyard?
Yeah, with the new addition, we'll still be close to 11 feet from the property line. We don't have a plan the rear yard would be a mix of sod and gravel for parking.
I'm sorry, you broke up for me a little bit there. Can you say that one more time?
Sure. Without a landscape plan, a final landscape plan at this point, we still, we've had the discussion that we would like to have a mix of sod and gravel for parking in the rear yard because of that ability to get past the addition.
Gotcha. Okay, and the 2nd story, you said it was 18. Is it because there's already a second story there now, right? Are we renovating and adding, or are we, what exactly?
Yeah, the house has a second story currently. Actually, the master suite is upstairs. So in order to get the master suite down on the lower level, we're basically moving the bedrooms upstairs. And to do that, I'm simply stacking a bedroom over a current bedroom on that back corner. But we're not going past the existing back of the house with that two-story. The addition that goes beyond the existing back of the house is a one-story porch.
I think Wyatt Pugh is asking to speak.
Okay.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that gravel is not an acceptable media for parking. Parking will have to be on a hard surface. So if there's an issue with impervious surfaces being greater than 50% of the lot already, you might want to figure that into the total.
Okay. The lot area is 10,675 feet, and the existing lot coverage that we have, including that garage that's going to be demolished, is a little over 4,400 feet. What we're proposed is at 3,600 feet. So we're actually reducing it. So I think we've got we'll have some wiggle room for.
Okay, so even if you put in a hard surface parking pad, you'd still be under the 50%.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Great, thanks.
Okay. No further questions, and someone wants to make a motion.
I move we approve BZA case SB-20-04-05.
I'll second. Ty.
All right, Ms. Vicky, we have a motion and a second.
All right, Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. LaBeouf,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Foley, Mr. Foley,
Yes, I'm sorry, my space bar didn't work.
okay, and Mr. Jarman.
Yes. All right, your request is approved. You have 180 days to pull your permit.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you. Okay, item number 6. SV 2004-06, 307 English Circle.
Yes, this is Trip Galloway for the owners, Jason and Amelia Strauss.
Okay, if you would obviously state your name and address and the nature of your hardship.
All right, the address is, the subject address is 307 English Circle. My address is 2200 Woodcrest Place, Suite 310, 35209. This is a situation where in December of 19, Steve McGuire, who's on the line today, is the general contractor for the Strausses. He had submitted a petition for the repair and restoration of a accessory structure in the back right corner of the Strauss property. It was approved. He undertook to delicately proceed with that work because of the nature of some, there had been some wood damage from termites over the years, and they wanted to make sure they went slowly, paced it appropriately so that they could do the restoration and repair work and there was removal work as part of this appropriately. It got down to where a lot of the removal work had been done, and then in early 2020 on a Saturday, there was projected to be a very significant wind event threatening tornadoes. Ms. Chitwood, who lives next door with her family, had communicated to the Strausses and that made it to Mr. McGuire, legitimate concern about the prospective presence of the building, what was left at that point, staying in its then current state in what was an acknowledged oncoming significant wind event. The Strausses and Mr. McGuire examined the situation, and they decided that it was an appropriate issue where what they needed to do for the health and safety of all involved was to go ahead and shave off, and Mr. McGuire is here and he can talk in detail about what they did, but shave off the remaining rear gable and second story of the back wall to take down the part that would most logically be exposed and could be ripped off if the winds got as bad as predicted. So they did that. And so what was left was, at the end of the day, was the rear wall, and there are photographs. I had submitted them to Mr. Godwin and to Wyatt earlier today in hopes that they would make their way to the members of the board. Were y'all able to get some materials from us?
Yes.
Okay. So there is a rear wall with wood on the inside and old brick on the back that was remaining. And before Mr. McGuire could start back on the restoration process, Mr. Pugh communicated to him that the previously granted building permit had been pulled as in withdrawn. We never got any paperwork on that, but that's what we were communicated. And rather than being people who were going to say do something in contravention until we got paperwork, we went ahead and stopped work and examined our situation and figured that the most appropriate route to go forward, while we did not agree with the purported termination of the building permit, was to go back, present this situation to the BZA and seek for a variance that our building permit be reissued, although we want to be clear, we have never received a writing saying that it has been pulled, that we may restart our work. And so it is, we have been advised of submissions by a rear neighbor concerning stuff wanting to be revisited about a 2016 matter, and something about complaints about Ray Wygan having inconsistent surveys of their property. I don't belittle their concerns, but I submit that this is a very narrow issue while we're here tonight. And that is, in this NPD property, a very old, elegant structure they're seeking to restore. They got approval, and they made a decision based on an articulated concern for health and safety by a neighbor that I would hope, thinking governmental officials would say, I want my citizens to make that same decision 10 times out of 10 under the circumstance and take that second story down. And so my impression is that those who decided the building permit should be pulled analyzed the situation and said the shaving of the second story went past the tipping point of that there wasn't, that this was more removal than restoration, so therefore the building permit should be pulled. And I submit that there are exceptional circumstances. I don't concede that it's past the tipping point, but under the circumstances, we're seeking relief to have the building permit reissued. And as a part of that, it is set out that the the setbacks that we seek to be blessed with as part of this request are where the existing structure is presently on the back, which goes anywhere from 6 inches, which is 0.5 feet, to 3.3 feet on the rear. So it would be for 0.5, but we would not go close. We would keep it where it is. And then on the side, which is the chipwood side, and if Ms. Chipwood chooses to, she can articulate whether she has concerns about it, whether it's too close or not. I think she does not, but I'll let her speak for herself. It's supposed to be 10 feet because it's historically a 2-story structure and is to be replaced with it and restored to a 2-story structure. And that migrates from being 3.9 feet to 4.9 feet. So the request is to allow it to be is a variance of 6.1 feet from the side. And the Strausses are on the line and can speak as needed, as is Mr. McGuire.
They can either speak now or they can speak during the public portion of the hearing, either one. But if they speak in the public portion, they will have to be, I would assume they would be want to do it before the public portion is opened and closed.
I would think they would want to do it before it is closed. I mean, Amelia and Jason, I yield to you if there's anything you want to say at this time.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. Thank you for your time tonight. Well, I would ask that we be granted this request. This building has existed since the house was built it's been 100 years old. It's always been used as a living space. I actually grew up across the street from the house that we live in now. And the second story has been used as a living space, as the bottom story kind of, as our cars got bigger, was used less as a garage over the years because the cars couldn't really get in and out. But it's been a part of the street for 100 years. I would just point out that every house on this street has an accessory building that are pretty much all on the property line. Ours might be one of the ones that comes off of it the most. So I'm concerned about a precedent here of what we can do with these buildings and restoration or renovation and these historic homes where we have tight lots and the houses are further back on the lot. So that's one thing I would behoove you guys to maybe consider as far as a precedent goes. And just in general for Homewood, especially the Hollywood area, I mean, we all have these buildings, and as we're having to do work to them, I'm sure the BZA has been and will be even more so slammed with requests about how to best keep the safety of these structures, how to best renovate, restore. And there's been some confusion that we've had along the way about the definitions and all of that. But we, unfortunately, are in a situation where we have some neighbors who very much agree with rebuilding, and then we have neighbors to the rear who do not. So I hate that this is a contentious issue on the agenda tonight, but I guess it is. So I hope we can all kind of come to an agreement at the end about how to best solve this. One of the things you guys were given in the opposing letter was about impervious ground, and I would submit that it's already impervious ground where this building is, because the slab is still there, so nothing is changing about that. I am personally very emotionally attached to the street, so my intention was to make this building safe for my children as we raise our family there, safe for the neighborhood as kids run in and out. In fact, the neighbors behind us who are on this call in opposition, their children actually go in and out through the side of our property next to that structure, which is falling over, safeguarded as it sits there as a back one wall situation. But my hope was to work with what we had. So that's why the plans we submitted looked similar. We didn't try to change anything. I mean, I wanted to honor what was there and not ruffle anyone's feathers. And unfortunately that has happened, but that would be about what I would say. And thank you for your time. Do you have anything?
Nope, that was perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm Steve McGuire. I'm the builder, and I live at 313 Lejeune Way. And I have worked with Jason and Eddie on other projects in the past. What I'd like to say is that from the get-go, this structure was dilapidated. It was standing, and you could look at it and say, well, it looks okay, but then you look closer and you realize it's leaning, I don't know what, 5 degrees, 10 degrees maybe to one side. It had no sheathing on it, so therefore the siding over the years, and like Amelia said, it's probably 100 years old. It was racking. The building was racking. The studs on the thing were placed, I think, anywhere from 18 inches to 36 inches apart in places. It was sitting on a brick sill. There was really no proper foundation under it, what we would call proper today. And my goal was to go in and upgrade the structure, make it safe, make the walls plumb, floors level. Because they were going to spend a significant amount of money, I wanted to create a structure that was going to go into the future and meet current building codes. So before having a chance to get to all that, of course, we had a stop order put on the project. I will speak to the wind issue we had coming. We had supported that rear wall very, very carefully. Tap-conned a number of secure braces to the concrete slab. And it was after that wind advisory came up that the fear of the neighbors and of mine, really all of us, the concern was that the wind would come from the southwest as it typically does in those storms. And that building sat at right angles to that. And it was, if it went down, would have probably blown right on the back neighbor's garage. And that was not something that any of us wanted to happen. Of course, there was also a potential for somebody being injured, which we wouldn't have wanted either. So, just a structure that's been there for a long time, a plan that was not doing anything out of the ordinary, really, as far as the look of it, and a wind issue that had us take it down further than we would have liked to have had to do initially. And that's kind of where we sit today. And I would yield back to Trip Galloway.
Thank you, Steve. I should have brought this up, Mr. Chairman, at the outset, that the back building, according to Jefferson County records, was constructed in 1926. So it is right at, according to county records, 94, 95 years old. So it is, it is not surprising to hear Steve recount the construction situation not being consistent with what the standards are today. So I think at this time, we would certainly answer any questions that any members of the board would have, and would want to clarify that we do have the opportunity to speak during the public hearing as well at the end, or to respond to matters raised in the public hearing. Is that correct from the procedural angle?
Yes. Once you're done presenting your case, we will open the public portion. Public will speak. We will close the public portion, and you can respond to any and all questions or concerns that the public had.
Yes, sir. And I'm okay. In that case, we will like to rest with the conclusion that we submit a narrow matter before the board, which is the the request to withdraw the stop work order, directive, whatever the proper terminology is, given the kind of confusion about actually whether a written stop work order was issued. And, you know, if others have concerns about, you know, the general trend of how accessory structures are treated, or complaints about inconsistent surveys on their property, I'm not saying those aren't meaningful issues, but I don't know that they're meaningful to what's before you on this item number 6. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we will open up the public portion of this case.
At this time, you only have one person, Bob Eccles.
Okay. Mr. Eccles, if you'd like to state your name and address for the record and whatever comment you would like to make.
My name is Bob Eccles. I live across the street on 308 English Circle. My wife and I have been here for 30 years. Our daughter, who is the applicant tonight, along with Jason, grew up here, and I have 3 granddaughters over there, and I certainly want to keep them there. I hope the board will help me keep them there. I don't want them to leave, and I think that what they're trying to do is will be enhance that property, enhance the value of other properties in the circle. It would be good for the tax base of our city, and good for the city of Homewood, where we have lived for, I don't know how many years now, 50 years, I guess. And that's basically what I'd like to ask you to grant their request and let them finish this project. And I'd say their builder, who just spoke to you, Steve McGuire, he lives right behind our backyard, and he's done 2 major projects at our house. And it's really been good for us, good for the neighborhood, good for the city of Homewood. And he did a project at Amelia's house. He increased the size of their house, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, and did a wonderful job. So I hope you'll allow this project to move forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Just a reminder for folks that are online, please do not unmute yourself. We will need to call on you, and please put your request, your name into the chat function so that we can call on you that way. Next up is Lindsay Chitwood.
Hi, Lindsay Chitwood, 309 English Circle. I'm the next door neighbor. Yes, I was very concerned about the high wind situation. I believe it was 70-mile-an-hour predicted winds. And I was concerned about the safety of that particular wall staying up in that area. I was glad to see they took it down. That structure has been I don't want to say an eyesore, because that's rude, but it had struggled to stay, I would say, complementary to the rest of the neighborhood and complementary to the house in which it belongs to. It was leaning. Our kids play in that backyard, in that garage space, or not in the garage, but on the thing. And, you know, it's not stable. I think many of them are not. I think lots of back structures and houses are not stable after 100 years. And you do never know, once you open it up to fix it, what you're going to find. I know if anybody's ever done things on their house, even on new houses, you open up a wall and all of a sudden something's been leaking and things happen. So I would like to see it restored the way it was. I signed up for this house with that garage as it was on that piece of property. So I expected it to be there now and when I leave this house. So that's kind of the way I think about those things. So if they could just continue on with the project they were approved for in the beginning, that would be great. Right now it is a construction site, so now it is again an additional safety hazard for all of our children. And yes, for the last 10 years, the neighbor kids have used that cut through between their back house and our garage and driveway area as a way to get to the circle, where it's a little easier to play, where there's less traffic. So both the complaint neighbor and lots of other kids, this is a thoroughfare that they travel through. And now it's a construction site, so we've blocked it off. Anyway, so the fact that there's a technicality because of a 70-mile-an-hour wind situation is beyond me, but you guys can decide on that. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
I believe that the Giardinas, I believe they can't figure out the chat function, so we will just let them unmute themselves. They're the only other ones at this point. So if they'd like to unmute themselves and speak.
Go ahead.
First of all, I apologize. I'm over at my neighbors because we can't get for some reason, couldn't get the chat function to work on our computer, so I apologize for that. This is Warren Giardina. I live at 304 Point Siena Drive, and our house backs up to 307 English Circle. The garage is basically right there on our line. So anyway, there's a couple things I want to make clear. First of all, I think it's important to define what restoration means in this case. The structure obviously is no longer there. And prior to the last wall coming down, it came down in about 2 days. We have photographs of it. So we're wondering how it was qualified as a restoration without having to go to BZA in the first place. The other thing is the addition to the house that's already been built, which that's water under the bridge, already does look into our yard and takes away from our privacy, and we feel has affected the property value for us. We have no privacy in our backyard, and actually English Circle, because of the removal of the vegetation screening the property, the security light or street lamp in English Circle shines into our bedroom. Also, our neighbors can clearly see into our house, and we can clearly see into theirs as well. And I'm sure our our back porch light bothers them just as much as the back porch light. But I just want to first of all make clear that that I don't believe it came down awfully fast to be a restoration. And then finally, the last thing is I know Tripp wanted to make sure to keep this narrow, and the only reason I included survey information with the surveys and the information regarding the surveys in my response or our opposition was because the survey doesn't seem to match up with where the building actually is. The building is, if not right on our line, 6 inches, well, actually more like closer to a foot onto our line, over our line, onto our property. Now, when the structure is there, that's not a big deal. We knew that at closing. The previous owners knew that at closing. It's obviously been there for a very long time. But once it's torn down, as you know, there are issues. And of course, we've already feel like we've been disaffected by the addition to their house. So that's my piece, and I'll let y'all go from there.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the public chat?
At this time, nobody else has requested to speak on this item.
Okay, going once, twice. Okay, so we will close the public portion. And Mr. Galloway, if you would like to respond to any and all of those comments.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I thank the people for speaking. I'm a big fan of citizen involvement, whether it's for or against the matter that I'm advocating. But I think it is important, and I don't want to contradict myself and get wider than the narrowness I was advocating. But when the issue is raised about that my client's building is seemingly on their property, and that's not a big deal, but it is. There was a 2014 survey, I believe, submitted to the city by the rear neighbor that was part of the represented to be part of the closing package when that house was purchased. There was a subsequent survey by the same company that showed, contrary to the 14 survey, the Strauss accessory structure was on Strauss property exclusively. It was not on Giardina property. And then we have a survey that shows the same thing of our property. So it is, to the extent the board had angst over an inconsistency in 3 surveys from Mr. Wygand's office, I would suggest that the board could approve the variance contingent upon city officials confirming that the structure is in fact exclusively on the Strauss property. I think legally the city would be hard pressed to properly grant a variance for someone to build on someone else's property. All right, I think that would be problematic. I don't think that is the case, and I'm very confident in that. And there would be ways for the city to satisfy itself on that, and the Strausses would be willing to foot the surveying bill to accomplish that. But I mean, one could hear to me in the voice, Ms. Chitwood's voice, that this was the right neighborly thing to do to remove that upper part. And I think if the Strausses, we've talked about it outside the presence of the board, if they have the same situation, they'd make the same decision. And it doesn't benefit them to have taken that down, and they're not trying to game the system, but that's something they did out of concern for neighbors and themselves for safety reasons. And I think was the appropriate decision. And I ask that y'all consider this, that this is, the threat of high weather, high wind, adverse weather situation is a sufficient hardship for that decision to have been made. And it is therefore justifies reinstating the stop work order that resulted from making that decision.
Okay, thank you. Any board members have any questions? Is Mr. Pugh still around, available?
Yes, sir, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Can you give us a little backstory on the permit for restorations is variance request, and then I guess why it was pulled, so everybody's up to speed?
Yeah, yes, sir. I'll be glad to do that. The original plan that was submitted outlined a scope of work that was very clear in terms of that it was going to be a restoration. It involved propping up the structure while it was an extensive restoration. We understood that. They were upfront about that, but it was a restoration nonetheless. There would be a structure remaining the whole entire time. Even though there was going to be some foundation work, the structure was still going to be propped up. I'm all about restoration. I've done much of it myself, so I have a soft spot for that. I didn't have a problem in the world with them on this extensive restoration. It made sense to me, so I did issue the permit. A little while later, though, I began getting complaints that the structure had been completely demolished. Given the wording of the zoning ordinance, which is very clear of what is and what is not a restoration, and it's very clear about when a zoning requirement is triggered, I was in a position where I had to do, as my job, I had to go out there and inform them that the work would have to be stopped and the permit would have to be retracted, pending their submittal of a zoning compliant new set of plans or an approved variance. So
okay. Was that when they had took down the one upper wall because of the wind, or is that after it was completely demolished?
When I visited the site, all I can tell you is that there was nothing left except for a slab and I think a lower rear wall. That's all that was remaining, and that does not constitute restoration of an existing structure.
Okay.
By the wording of the zoning ordinance, I should say.
Okay. Thank you for that information.
Yes, sir.
Any board members have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question for the contractor, and I understand a big part of this issue is the wind event or the storm, the potential storm, and could that not have been temporarily braced? I know you said you had it braced, but I know that there are construction sites all over that experience high wind events, and they don't tear down the building, a building that's under construction because, or remove stuff. They just provide extra bracing or things like that. I can't understand why that an upper wall had to be taken down when it could have been braced additionally in some way to make it safe enough for this potential wind event.
This is Steve McGuire again. Yes, we've had the back wall braced substantially, and it was a decision that we made basically at the 11th hour, the day that the windstorm was due in, to go ahead and take all the bracing loose, cut it down to 1 story in the back, and then that's what we were left with, was just the 1 story at the back. Could we have done it differently? Absolutely. I'm sure I could have put braces all over the place. Could I have guaranteed the wind wouldn't do some damage and blow it around? No, I couldn't. It was going to be a major restoration, and I made that clear in my permit application and was approved for doing that. I understand that Wyatt is saying that he approved something that was a step-by-step, and he's right. The plan has step-by-steps on it, and not all those steps were met. But our goal was to make it safe. And when we started the demolition and we had the windstorm blow up, and we got scared, frankly, and we had other people that were scared. We did not want to hurt anybody. We didn't want to tear up anybody's property with the thing blowing over on it. So, that's what we were left with. That being said, it could have been done differently, certainly. Yes, I wouldn't deny that. Absolutely.
Okay, how did we go from tearing one upper wall down to the whole thing being demoed?
Wyatt, is that Wyatt speaking?
No, this is Mr. Jarman, the chairman.
Okay. As we got into it with my framing crew there working, doing the demolition, the more we took down, and it just got to a point where, as I said in my letter I submitted initially, that I think the wording was something like, note that the existing garage structure is in extremely poor condition and that the items mentioned above are currently not conforming. I said that we're going to attempt to salvage and reuse old materials where possible, particularly the old brick that currently exists on the face of the foundation walls. There was no hiding of the fact going into this that this was going to be a major reconstruction, renovation, whatever you want to call it. And the bottom line is that once we got started and we got to tearing on it, and as Mr. Giardina said, it came down in a couple of days. I don't deny that it did. I mean, once they got rolling on it, one thing led to another. But when the storm came up, our intention was to leave the back wall, gable and all, in place. And that was our instruction on the pink house that we were given by Mr. Pugh. So I felt that was, and theirs is on the lot line as well. So therefore, at that point, I felt like we were well within what we needed to be doing to be able to rebuild the structure.
Okay, one more question. So, I mean, it sounds like the taking down of that one upper wall was not really a factor in having to tear down the rest of the building. I mean, it seems like if you hadn't torn it down and it survived, once you started digging into it and getting everything fixed, you would have realized it was going to be the same situation. It would have dropped anyway.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite clear on what you're saying. Are you saying that had we left more of the structure in place?
I'm saying that once you started your renovation, you found out that the structure was not going to be able to be renovated, I guess, that's what I'm.
That's exactly right. Once we got into the structure, and I mean, you could see some of it, you couldn't see. There was sheetrock on the upper walls, so we really couldn't see that from the inside. But from the lower level, the garage section, we knew we had a foundation that was not good, and we knew that the studs were not on proper centers, and that the building was leaning. I mean, I was in a situation where I guess I could have put a four-wheel drive vehicle over on Miss Chipwood's driveway and tried to rack it back and, brace it back up where it was plumb. But it was really, the structure was really, for all practical purposes, not really something you could just renovate in some typical renovation fashion. I mean, I've done renovations in Forest Park since 1972. And I've done hundreds of renovations in old homes. So, I knew that the bones of this one were no good. And I tried to make that clear in my attachment. I handed off with the building permit application. So, we were granted a permit. We did go into it. I wasn't going to take a surgical procedure and just piece by piece. That wasn't going to be appropriate ever. Did we get carried away and move too quickly? I guess I could have asked Wyatt to come out and looked at it halfway through and said, look what we've got now. But, I've got pictures. I can show pictures of what we have. And the structure was, again, it's been there since the 20s. It was leaning. It needed to be essentially rebuilt. Call it a renovation, call it whatever you want to call it.
This is Stuart Roberts. I just wanted to be clear on exactly what was left of the original structure as of the day Ms. Chitwood raised concerns about potential of the building collapsing or falling or causing some safety hazard. What was left of the original building as of that point? And I don't know if that's a question. It might be a question for Mr. McGuire.
I can't speak to it because Amelia, and I think Amelia spoke with Lindsay. Is that correct, Amelia, about her concern? So I'm not sure exactly where the structure was at that point. I couldn't give you an exact what wall was up and what wall was down.
Well, that's fair, Mr. McGuire. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I guess my question is that at some point after Ms. Chitwood spoke with Ms. Strauss and communicated we need to take some portion of the structure down to mitigate safety issues. Were any of either of the side walls or front wall there? Was there anything in that structure other than the rear wall?
Honestly, I don't know when they had that conversation.
Okay. Can you recall whether the left and right, if you're facing the front of the building, whether the left and the right walls of that building had already been demoed before the issue arose relating to the wind and the wind event?
I don't know. I think the wind event was probably predicted for about 3 days. I'm guessing. I mean, I know on the weather app when I look at it, usually it's advertised in advance. My greatest concern was the night before and the day of, but the communication from Amelia. I wasn't on the job at all times, so I can't. My framers were, but so I can't really speak to that. I honestly don't know what was standing and what wasn't at that time.
Okay, and you indicated earlier, Mr. McGuire, that you waited to the last second. I think the storm you're talking about came through on January 11 and midday on that Saturday. You said you waited till the day before to take action, which would have been that Friday the 10th. again, you don't have any recollection one way or the other whether the other two walls, the side walls, had been removed already at that point.
No, I know they were not down on the day of the storm, because I think it's that morning that we went over on that day of the storm, actually took that upper portion of the back wall down. But the day before, I don't know, what was standing. It was, again, I wasn't on site at all times.
Okay, and maybe this is a question, because I know that Mr. Galloway sent the city an email from Ms. Chitwood from back in January, I think January 20th, explaining her concern and why she had asked that something be done to address the safety issue. And that email attached a photograph of the property as she was looking at it. And we received a copy of the email, but not a copy of the photograph. Mr. Galloway, do you have a copy of the photograph Ms. Chitwood shared?
I do not, and I had indicated in that email that I did not have that. So not trying to hide the ball. I do not have it. The Strausses may be able to speak to Mr. Roberts. Is it fair to say that you would like as much information as possible as to what the accessory structure status was on the Friday in question and the Saturday in question?
Well, really just going back before that, the question is at some point in time, enough of this building had been removed that what was being done to it or what was being planned for it had transitioned from a restoration, which is what you were permitted to do, and became basically a new building because too much of the building had been removed for it to be considered a restoration. My understanding, well, I'm trying to get the understanding from someone, whether it's the Strausses or Mr. McGuire or you, what was remaining when this act of God happened? What actually had to be removed because of the wind event on January 11? What was done to the building at that time? Was it just the top part of the back wall, or was it more than that? Because I do think that has some bearing on whether or not that's a hardship.
All right. It is my understanding, and Steve, I invite you to correct me, that and the Strausses may be able to weigh on this as to the sides, but that and Ms. Chitwood may also, if she's still on the line, is that what was removed on that Saturday or the Friday eve of Saturday was the second story, which included the remnant gable of along the back wall. And what I do not know from firsthand experience is what was the status of, were there any sidewalls, remnant sidewalls at the time? And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but when on the sidewall work, wasn't the vision that you had to cut out, at least to start, the bottom part first and then try to save the second story and brace the second story?
I can speak to what I remember. I remember that at the end of the day, I believe on the Friday, we braced up the back wall extremely well, and it was the only thing standing at that time. That would have been Friday afternoon. So,
okay.
How much of the walls came down? The walls, I mean, you all understand, we're talking about a garage here. We're not talking about a house. Wall can come down pretty quickly. So I don't know where we were on Friday morning. There were walls standing, I'm sure, but by the end of the day, that back gable was braced up to the point where I was pretty confident it was going to be safe. And then somewhere after that, became very concerned myself when I saw the weather report ramping up more. And we showed up the next morning and took that back part down to one level. So again, I can't tell you, Stuart, when the sidewalls went down. I just know that on the afternoon, Friday afternoon, I remember the wind event was very much in the news, and that we braced that whole gable end up trying to save it, because all along it was my understanding that a wall needed to be left standing. in order to continue to build this structure. So that was our goal at that time, to brace that wall up and save it. And as it
Okay.
turned out, we only saved a portion of it.
And if we still have Mr. Pugh on the line, and I guess that's a question I don't know the answer to. It's not normally in our bailiwick, but Mr. Pugh, can you address the issue that Mr. McGuire just raised, which is had one of the walls been preserved, in this case the rear wall, had the wind event not occurred, had they been able to keep that rear wall, but the other walls had been demolished, and then they rebuilt with that rear wall still intact, would that be considered a restoration, or would that have gone beyond the point of restoration to where a variance would be required?
Well, I'm afraid that would have gone beyond the point of what could be considered a restoration. I know it's a common belief that as long as you maintain one wall, left standing, that you still have a structure. That's never been the way it's been interpreted anywhere I've worked, in Birmingham and Homewood. I wouldn't mind if that was codified and that became the definition we went by, but as of now, it's just not. I mean, you need to have a structure to restore, and just leaving a wall doesn't constitute a restoration. I'm sorry.
Okay, so if the sidewalls had been gone before steps were taken to prevent damage from the wind event, we would have already been beyond the point of where restoration was still possible.
If you're describing a situation where only one wall is left standing, then yes, we would have gone too far. I mean, I can understand removing a wall or two, and I'm like I mentioned at the beginning, I knew this was going to be an extensive restoration. I understood there were going to be some parts and pieces removed periodically, but if you're describing a situation where only one wall was left standing, yes, it's too far.
Okay, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'd like to, if I may, just remind Wyatt, and I have all the respect for you, and I'm not trying to, but my son met with you at the Pink House and was told that if he left a wall standing, that would be something that would be considered to be okay as far as taking a structure down. Now, maybe your mind has changed since then, or maybe that structure has some special thing going on that this one doesn't, but that's part of what I was operating on. Now, you didn't tell me that, but you told somebody who works for me, who owns my company, that, and that's sort of what I was going on. And what do I need to believe on this?
Okay. Did you mention the Pink House? Is that what?
Yes, sir, I did. I'm talking about the accessory structure at the Pink House that's on the lot line that we're working with the owner on renovating, and the agreement I understood was that one wall was to be left standing on the alley, I believe. And that house, that structure is non-conforming both on the street side and on the alley side.
Okay, I don't recall saying that as long as you leave one wall standing, and that's the that's the measure. What I do recall, and I do recall clearly discussing the accessory structure for the Pink House, and my recollection of that conversation went something like this: that I love the concept of restoration of old structures, and I would hate to see that accessory structure have to be torn down and moved because of the zoning ordinance. And so what I agreed to was that it was going to be an extensive restoration. I understood that if they presented a plan where they ended up tearing most of it down, but stockpiling all the original materials right there on site with the intention of putting it all right back where it was, that I felt like that was something that I could work with, just because I do want to see restorations of old structures. I did step out on a limb there. That was not the plan that was presented to me on this project, though.
Well, can I read the letter that I submitted with my permit?
Yes.
Okay. This was an attachment to the city of Homewood. And I say, and it was an attachment because the brief description area of the permit cards is so small. And I just wanted you all to understand going in what I had in mind for the structure based on the condition it was in. And we had extensive conversations with people there about how dilapidated it was and how impractical it was to try to put this structure back without doing something very, very significant as far as the structure. I say upgrade, replace footings, foundation, slab, framing, and exterior stair at the existing garage to satisfy current building code requirements while building to match the submitted plan dated October 10th, 2019 by Riley Strauss Design. Please note that the existing garage structure is in extremely poor condition and that the items mentioned above are currently non-conforming. When I say items mentioned above, I'm talking about footings, foundation, slab, and framing, all non-conforming to today's code. Mitigation of these non-conforming items will require the virtual rebuilding of the existing structure. We will attempt to salvage and reuse old materials where possible, particularly the old brick that currently exists, which we have stockpiled on site, and that existed on the face of the foundation walls. The exterior width, length, dimensions, and the location of the newly renovated built structure are not to change from those of the existing garage structure as shown on the survey by Wygan surveyors dated December 3rd, 2019. So that was the best I could do to put on paper and submit with the permit. And that permit was approved. So
that's a good summary, if I may just jump in right there real quick.
Go ahead.
That's a very good summary of the extensive conversations that I and zoning staff had with the homeowners. And that's true. That's true. We understood it was going to be a virtual rebuilding of the entire structure. I knew parts of it would be removed at times. You know, you'd see it in various states of disassembly and, you know, such, but you know, that was me wanting to work with the idea of restoration of an old structure. I'm all about that, but I was put in the unfortunate position of having to come out there and see a slab.
I understand. Well, I'm gonna kick it back to Tripp, if I may. I wanted to be clear up front. That's why I submitted this letter with the permit application. And I think there has to be some issue here about rewriting the regulations where it's clear and that we can all understand. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Chairman, if we could make sure, I had in the 5 o'clock hour at some point, I believe, I had emailed that letter to Wyatt and to Fred asking that it be added to the record. So I would ask at this time that make sure that is done. I think it's interesting that both Mr. Pugh and Mr. McGuire basically agree as to the discussions that were had and the language used, in that there's not a real disagreement as to what the expectation of the challenge of this project would be. And so if there were if there were to be specific limits in terms of you got to have so many walls, this percentage of exterior facing portions of roof, et cetera. I submit that that needs to be in the code, which I don't think it is. Mr. Pugh, I invite you to correct me if I'm wrong, but the code has no specific standards of X percentage or these features have to remain in order for something to be restoration rather than renovation. It's kind of gray. And so when Mr. McGuire submits this letter as part of the application, which is then approved, it seems to me that the city has accepted that this is the challenge and that we're going to try to do our best, and this is the goal to try to preserve. And so it is, I feel like there's been there was a zig and now there's a zag by the city in terms of what the rules of the game are. And that's not fair to the Strausses. And that's why we're here. And I think one thing that Mr. Pugh did mention was that a remedy that the Strausses have, given the current interpretation of the state of the property, is to seek a variance. Mr. Pugh, am I right in that is a remedy that you think is potentially on the table? Not that they're necessarily going to get it, but that is a potential remedy for the situation they're in.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's why we're here. And he did a nice job of talking me out of going to court. And so I'm glad we're here. It would be one thing if our application said we were going to leave 3 walls in the roof. It didn't say that. And so we got approved with all these disclaimers about the challenges and very open, candid dialogue. And so without any standards, I don't see how we can be held to our standards that are not set forth. I mean, that's void for vagueness. In the law, I think if it examined the situation, would say that there's serious due process issues here because the standards are not articulated and set forth. We don't really want to go that route. We want to have an appropriately styled and sized structure here. So in a spirit of trying to accomplish that under the circumstances, and let me say, the Strausses are very appreciative of the candor that Mr. Pugh has exhibited here, and so that is, I think that is commendable. What we would propose, Mr. Chairman, and I defer to you on the protocol of this, but is that if there is one who seeks on the board to approve what we have submitted, we invite such person to make a motion at the appropriate time. If there is not such a thought amongst any board member, but they share the same struggles that others do, myself included, about the seeming inconsistency on how this matter has been treated along the timeline, we would proffer that the Strausses would be willing to accept a reduced variance so that they could build using the brick that they have. They commit to trying to use the spirit of restoration, but have a 5-foot rear setback, the same requested right side setback, 5 foot on the rear, which is approximately the same distance that the Giardinas show on their 2 Wygand surveys. And by the way, they have a 2-story building with a window looking out at our property. So there's some clean hands on the issues of intrusion into the rear neighbor, and that would be a way to deal with this matter. But I echo Steve's sentiment that I think it's something Homewood ought to consider, is quantifying what makes restoration going forward. And it may be that the city likes to have the flexibility of not having it quantified, but the lack of quantification should not mean that the applicant who has been forthcoming about the difficulty and what challenges are there and how they intend to address it then get penalized when it ends up being a worst case scenario, which is what we had. Not only have worst case scenario in terms of quality of construction, we had a worst case scenario in terms of a wind event. And there was one of the board members had asked about could you have, Mr. Martin, it may have been you about, could you have done less in terms of demolition of the rear wall? And I think a factor to consider in that is the time. I think if Steve, if you had known you had 2 weeks to do this, you may have been able to secure it with ropes and wire and stuff that might have made you say it's okay to roll the dice and see if this withstands. But you were dealing with a short time frame, as I understand it. Is that correct?
That's right. I mean, I think we probably had a 3-day window knowing that this one might be coming. But it was really the day before and the night of that it really got critical.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, I'm sorry. So pretty much that wraps it up. But I would like Mr. Chairman, for y'all to consider that proffer if there is not momentum to approve what is before you.
so to be clear, that was a proffer for a 5-foot rear setback.
Correct. And the the requested setback for the side would stay the same.
Can I ask a more nut and bolt question instead of something so esoteric as we've been discussing?
Yes, ma'am.
The original structure was designed as a garage. This is not. What are they going to use it for? I mean, they said they had to quit using the garage because the cars were too big. So it seemed to me that they wanted to have something they could fit their cars in again, but they can't. So that's where I'm confused. What is the point of this structure, and does that have any bearing on where it needs to be?
Amelia, could you address that, please?
Yeah, I got this one, Trip. So it's been used as storage and part-time office space, and so we would have it become storage, a prayer nook, and then a studio for her because she's a photographer upstairs, so an office space for her.
Okay.
And when I was talking about the cars not fitting in there, I didn't mean us specifically. I meant from the 1920s. Like.
Okay.
So
that's,
yeah.
Y'all got to talking about all this other stuff, and I'm still way back at the beginning.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we talking about this? Okay. Are y'all going to do anything about that side yard, or that's just unlandscaped and that little bit of grass that you have right behind the house between there and this structure?
Yeah, so I mean, just want to address, I had to tear that down because the power line, the power company. So once we're finished with construction, we'll kind of landscape that side yard, backyard, and put screening vegetation, likely cypress trees, similar to what we have on the right-hand side of our house between the backyard and our yard, their yard.
Thank you.
Is the structure going to be the same size as the previous?
Yeah.
Like width, height, all that fun stuff? Yeah.
Yes.
And it was going to be in the same spot?
It was.
Right.
That's right.
That's our preference, but yes.
Okay.
So that kind of leads into my questions. We keep talking about a restoration of an existing structure, which was a 2-level structure for cars and a space above it. Restoration is kind of restoring what was there, yet bringing it up to code, making some changes that might be a little bit different than what it is, where the drawing I see is not, I don't agree that the proportions look the same as what was there. It looks like it's a little bit taller. The other thing is it has some kind of structure on the right side, maybe a gable that's been added that was not on the original. So can someone just explain to me how this is a restoration project versus just a new building that's more square footage for living space? Not really a restoration.
This is Tripp. I will say that I don't know that the term restoration carries with it a mandate that the finished product has to be the same dimensions. I understand the thrust of the question, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that the scope of a project to qualify as a restoration has to exactly match dimensionally and square footage wise what was there before, unless, Mr. Pugh, is there something in the code to that effect? Because there could be, and I may be ignorant of it.
Sure. Just so that we can sort of all, live comfortably in our modern world, I tend to approve restoration projects that are oftentimes renovations and remodels. Oftentimes these accessory garages are repurposed into offices. Those kinds of projects are generally approved as long as they stay within the existing footprint and do not vary from the original height, or at least don't go any higher. This project, the plans that showed the before and the after height, they were identical, even though the roof line itself was going to be modified. That was something that I did discuss when Ms. Strauss came in the office. That was something at first I was a little hung up on, but I and some of the other zoning staff, we looked at some other cases where roof lines had been altered a bit and such, so we felt like it was only fair. I mean, it wasn't that big of a change. It was remaining within the same footprint. So in my mind, it was fair to call that a restoration, if that makes sense.
Well, I agree with your thinks about renovations, restorations, but I find it hard to believe a 10 and 12 roof kept it at the same height. When I look at the roof lines that are existing, and then we've got a little more roof line on the right side, creating a gable, which is making it on that right side. If you look at an elevation, that adds height on that side of the structure that was not there originally, facing the neighbor. That, it's went beyond restoration. I mean, it's definitely, it's almost as if it's just two different buildings at that point. So that's why I have a hard time. One was a garage existing with an upstairs area. This has just become more livable square foot throughout that doesn't even harken back to what the original building was. That's what restoration is. At least harkens back to what was there. And that's what everyone liked. Everyone talked about that. And it seems to be just a new building.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pugh, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was my understanding that the look of it would be substantially preserved. They were going to reuse old materials. It was my understanding that the height would not be significantly altered, nor the footprint. So my understanding when I approved the permit was, even though it does have a slightly different look when you look at the plans. I know there were some windows that replaced doors and such, and the garage doors were done away with. I felt okay with that because they were using the old materials, preserving the look. That was my understanding.
I would agree with you if that was going on. I mean, the drawing itself says new siding. I do think the proportions are different, which makes it higher. We'll probably never know since the building isn't there now. The scale of the doors and windows don't match the scale of the existing windows that were there. The style of window, a double hung, is not even being harkened back to. So it's not a renovation. It's clearly a new building with a new purpose and a new style to it.
But
that's kind of what I'm saying. If we're taking an existing structure and we're going to renovate it, that's the spirit, right? Versus this whole thing has come down now. If we're putting it right back like where it still harkened to that and it still had sort of the same structure, scale, siding, things like that, I think there'd be less opposition at that point versus, well, the whole thing came down and we've got this thing that's sort of like it, but not quite. And I don't see anything about restoration. I don't see anything about, where's all the old materials? Where's windows? Are either the existing windows or you want newer windows, but they could still look like the same scale of the double hung windows. Not seeing any of that here, right? So I think that's part of the,
I'd like
to me, that's part of the problem, is that we're not really in the spirit of what was there. I get it. I restore stuff all the time too. You've got to bring in the modern part to make it livable, right? Got to get the next 100 years in there. But there's just nothing to this, to that. To me, it's just a false
If I can
claim.
interrupt, is that a reason for not doing the project? Why were you in the city of Birmingham or Jefferson County before you came to Homewood? I've forgotten.
I was in Birmingham.
In Birmingham, so you're very familiar with historic preservation and the difference between a historic district where you actually have control over what people do on a structure versus a city like Homewood where you can literally pretty much do whatever you want. And I say that all the time. I want you to understand that the brick you're seeing here is the old brick as much as it can be. We're going to stretch it out there. The siding is artisan siding. It's not skinny hardy siding. It's hardy artisan siding, which is it's more of a historic look. It's bigger. It's a deeper, thicker dimension. But I guess I come back to the point where this is what we submitted to the city to build on this site, this plan that you all are looking at right now, that we were approved for with my letter. So I just, I'm not an attorney, but I just don't understand, the surprise now when it was approved then, and I just leave it at that.
Mr. McGuire, just to.
Excuse me, pardon me.
I'm sorry, I thought you'd stopped.
That's right, no, I'm sure, I'm through.
I was just gonna sort of tag on to what you were about to say regarding the city of Birmingham and historic districts. What Mr. Cole, what it sounded like you were describing was a historic review or a design review. Homewood doesn't have a historic standard attached to its definition of restoration. So, and there is no historic review. So in terms of trying to say, well, this is in terms of trying to turn down a permit because I don't feel like the windows match, that's not really something I have any kind of a code I can lean on to point to at the end of the day to say, well, I did it because this code says this, and that's kind of what I have to have. So the definition of restoration to me is very subjective. I mean, it's bringing the building back to something that can be used safely. I mean, that's extremely broad, but I would say that's kind of what it is. And to address your concern about the siding, yes, it does say new siding because the old siding was pretty rotted away, and they sourced some siding that was extremely similar to what was on it already.
I guess I have one more question. My understanding, I say understanding, I've read the file, is that back in November, the applicants sought a variance, basically the same variance they're seeking now, and withdrew that request. Well, let me back up. The variance requested, the hardship was that restoration of the building was untenable because it was cost prohibitive. And then at the end of, I think the day before the hearing, that request was withdrawn, that the application was withdrawn, ostensibly because I guess there was some change of view as to whether restoration was feasible. Can you give some background on that? Explain what happened there.
I was not involved at that point. It's my understanding that your supposition is generally consistent with what transpired, that the dialogue with Homewood, and Mr. Pugh, I invite you to contribute to this as you feel appropriate, was more extensive, and there was a comfort level from the Strausses that they could comply with what further dialogue with Homewood showed would qualify as restoration. And so, there's a concept in the law called detrimental reliance that is one of the first things you learn in law school. And the Strausses relied on the approval of the petition that is, to me, that petition, was very candid, set forth challenges, scope, etc. But also there are no standards as to what, like I've said before, about the percentages, how many walls got to stay, etc. So I really ask that y'all, carefully examine from a sense of fairness that the Strausses have gone through the proper procedures. They withdrew because, as I understand it, in a million, Jason, y'all can address this with greater specificity, but that a variance wasn't needed. So there's no point in going to get a variance if you don't have to have one. If you get a variance and somebody doesn't like it, they can appeal at circuit court. You're tied up for years. So,
Can I step in real quick, Chuck? So I think the gentleman just mentioned December 3rd or 4th. So we actually did not withdraw right before that meeting. I and also our architect, my brother-in-law, Riley, and I believe also Steve McGuire was headed to the BZA meeting. And I went to City Hall, and it had a cancel sign for that meeting because the Christmas parade was in the square. So I was actually there and very confused and left and went home. So I went in to talk to them and say what happened to the meeting, and then we started into some conversations, and I got to know some of the people down there, and went in and we really got into the nitty-gritty about the project and what the restoration was. So that's kind of how that happened. And then so they kicked us to the city, they kick you to the next hearing if it's canceled. So in that in-between time, we had conversations about what we could do and accomplish, and that's when we withdrew that we had been kicked to the next hearing because we just went forward and got the permit that was required.
Thank you. And I apologize. I was just curious about that. And I guess my other question on Mr. Galloway's point is the concept of detrimental reliance. There has to be some sort of damage. Are you saying that the Strausses would not have demolished the building but for the representations Mr. Pugh made? I guess it sounds like the building was coming down one way or the other.
The building was going to. The building. Go ahead, Jason.
We would not have torn down it was leaning and not pretty and an eyesore, as one of the neighbors said. We weren't going to tear the building down. I mean, it was our garage, our storage, and now, the pod and all this other stuff because we thought that we were going to be rebuilding the building.
And be done by now.
And be done by now, yeah. I mean, we would have been finished at this point. Because now it's effectively a slab and a mud pit that is sitting back there with nothing on it, and as Lindsay mentioned, dangerous for the kids.
Well, were you not ever notified that the meeting was held over till the next week?
No.
You didn't get any notification?
No.
You didn't call and ask? You just, when you left City Hall,
I didn't.
the parade.
Well, it was 6 o'clock. I mean, it was 6 p.m. I think
it was
on the 4th. So I thought this is very strange. Actually, I went in a couple of times before and asked Donna. I said, "Do you think they're going to change this meeting because it's the same as the Christmas parade?" And she said, "Well, the board has said they would go forward with it." So I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to park." And I went and parked kind of down behind Dimitri's so that I could get back to my car after, thinking the band was going to be outside during our BZA hearing. And then my brother-in-law actually met me there because he was there also. So, so then I went, I guess that was a Tuesday. I went in either Wednesday or Thursday and asked what had happened.
I'm just asking because we were told by the board secretary that everyone was emailed and that there was a notice on the door that the meeting would be held over to next week.
There was a notice. Yes. So I saw the notice on the door when I showed up to the meeting at 6 p.m.
So you didn't want to come back the next week?
I came in to talk to ask. Yeah, I came in myself to ask what was happening, and then
but I'm saying
I can't remember the date.
My question is, between the time that you found out that the meeting was going to be the next Thursday, why did you not come the next Thursday?
Because I got the permit.
Okay, so you massaged things to get it changed. Okay, got it. Just trying to figure this out. Okay, thank you. Anybody have any other questions? Yes.
I don't.
I move we approve BZA case SV-20-04-06.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do we want to inquire about the proffer he offered, or I guess that's up to them?
I can include the proffer for a 5-foot setback in the room.
It's up to the applicant, but they.
You want to do that?
I think.
It's not a, that's what I heard was a proffer for 5-foot setback in rear.
And that's the way you want the motion to read?
I mean, I heard the proffer, so I would assume that's the case.
All right. I just want to be sure I move that we approve BZA case SV-20-04-06 with a proffer for a 5-foot rear setback.
I second.
I have a question. This is Ty. I want to Trip. Is this what you guys want to do or not? I don't want to say we're forcing you to do the proper. I want to make sure you guys want this or not want this, not us tell you.
Well, I think it was the second hearing tonight where the gentleman asked after a negative vote, hey, can I do a proffer? And being sensitized to the tardiness of his request, we wanted to, given sort of the length of the everything and the totality of the discussions and the sensitivities, that is a choice B for us. And it's not a really close to choice A, but choice B we can live with. If there is a willingness to do A as requested, we would prefer that. But B is something that we can live with, that B being the 5 feet. So I initiated the proffer discussion, Mr. Cole, before a vote was taken, because I didn't want to put my clients in a box like I think it was the second or third applicant was, when his request for a proffer was after the first vote had been taken.
And I would like to say one thing really quick. My hope and goal is that our relationship with the Giardines is restored and neighborly, and I think that is their hope and intention as well. And if a 5-foot movement forward is more agreeable to them, and we can agree on screening vegetation, because Jennifer and I had communicated a little bit about that, and give them some of the privacy of their yard back, then I think that could restore some of the or relieve some of the contention here. I mean, I don't want to have a negative relationship with my neighbors. So yeah.
Mr. Cole, does that address the spirit of your question?
Yeah. It's more about making sure we're voting on what you guys are acceptable with. Sounds like you are.
Okay. I think that's a fair characterization. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, who seconded the motion?
I
Nobody
believe
yet.
Mr. Foley did. Oh,
Mr. Foley, somebody did.
Okay.
I seconded the motion with the proffer, so
Right.
we're
So,
back.
okay, all righty.
okay. We'll call the vote.
All right. Ms. Smith,
No.
Ms. LaBeouf,
No.
I'm sorry, I couldn't make it out.
No.
Okay, sorry. Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Foley,
Yes.
Mr. Jarman,
Yes.
and I'm sorry, who did I miss? Mr. Foley, Mr. Cole.
I already voted yes.
Okay, I've got Ms. Smith, Ms. LaBeouf, Mr. Cole, Mr. Foley, and Mr. Jarman.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So that's 3 yes and 2 no.
Okay. So that one does not pass.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry, variance request did not pass. Volume up, yeah. Okay. Case number 7. SVU 0-04-07, 200 East Linwood Drive. Is that applicant available?
Yes, this is Wayne Hester. I'm the architect for the project. My address is 2910 Linden Avenue in Homewood, 35209.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hold on
We
just one.
have,
Hold on one sec. Ms. Vicky, Ms. Smith is going to be abstaining from the vote on this case.
Okay.
So when we call the vote.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, Mr. Hester, you can continue.
okay. We have an existing non-conforming property due to the shape of the lot being pie-shaped. We have a triangular shaped area on the west corner, which is 7.1 feet from the side property line in lieu of the required 10 feet. Also, the rear yard impermeable exceeds the limit rather than 30% is 49.6%. We are requesting to build a one-story screen porch off the back of the house, 2 corners of which will be 7.1 feet off the property line as the existing residence is. So we're asking for a variance of 2.9 feet. As a part of this project, we'll be taking up a tremendous amount of concrete paving in the backyard, which will bring our impervious area to 30% as required by code.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. If there's anyone that would like to speak about this case, they may do so at this time.
At this time, we have not had anybody through chat ask to speak for this item.
Okay, then at this point, we will close the public portion and open to questions from the board.
So as I look at this, it looks like we're keeping the same setback variance that you have with the existing house with the new porch addition, always being at no closer than 2.9 at those 2 points of the porch as I see it, right?
Right, they won't be closer than 7.1 feet. They'll be 2.9 over that.
Sorry, I meant no closer than 2.9 from the property line, but yeah.
Okay.
It's 7.1 from the property line. So we're asking for a variance of.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I did say that wrong. No closer than 7.1 for the 2.9 variance, and the house already is at that same.
Right. We're extending that
point.
same line.
Okay.
And it's a covered porch, is that right?
It is.
Okay. Anyone have any further questions?
So I guess the question I have is which one of the supernumerary members would vote on this?
That's a Miss Vicky question.
I just want to know if I can move to approve.
I don't know. What have y'all generally done? Is it just?
Well, we've arm wrestled a couple times.
Oh.
I don't know. I think she would look at the first name on the roll below, and I don't remember who that is, honestly.
Mr. Marlin's on my vote sheet as.
Okay.
I think she would alternate it if we had somebody, a supernumerary voting for each one. Should one vote, the other vote, and alternate back. But
that's right. I just didn't know how she started. So,
yeah, so
Mr. Marlin's vote it is.
At the top of the list.
I will not move to approve then.
All right, I'll move to approve BZA case SV 20-04-07.
And I'll second it since I get to vote.
Yay. All right.
Okay.
All right, Ms. LaBeouf?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Jarman?
Yes.
Mr. Marlin?
Yes.
Yay.
Okay, your request is approved. You have 180 days to pull your permit.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. The 8th and final case of the evening is SV 20-05-01, 602 Morris Boulevard. Is Mr. Brown available?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I was muted. So this is Houston Brown, 602 Morse Boulevard, current homeowner and applicant. I also have with me Joe Ellis, is the architect for the project. So my hardship is similar to the last pie-shaped lot that narrows from front to back. We're proposing to add an addition to the existing property with basically 4 foot 8 inches going straight off the existing house line on the right side, and then step in 2 feet to get within inside the setback. So the current condition is like 10.1 feet off, and as that goes back and as the lot narrows up, it gets to 9.7 feet. So I'm crossing the variance by 0.3 feet. So that's my hardship. And talk to the neighbor that's on that side of the property. They are in agreement. I mean, they're fine with what we're looking at doing. Also, there's an existing garage structure, it's an eyesore one-story garage structure that'll be coming down as part of the project as well. So you guys should be able to see that if you have the existing and proposed surveys that were submitted as well.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a public hearing. If anyone would like to speak about this case, they may do so at this time.
As of right now, we have had nobody put into chat that they would like to speak about this item.
Nobody. Okay. Then at this point, we will close the public portion and open up to questions from the board.
Did you say Joe is with you?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Joe.
After that last 2 cases ago, when you saw 3 different surveys, say 3 different things from the same company, is 4 inches all you need?
Plus or minus.
Nice.
Can I already move to approve this, or is that out of order?
I'll second it.
You sure you really want that much, Joe, huh? Okay.
I think that's all we need.
Okay. Don't come back and
Thanks.
forget.
Thanks for stepping it in 2 feet.
You're welcome.
We do what we could.
You always do. Okay, was that a motion in a second? Did I hear that?
If time moved, I
Yeah, I'll
said
make
I'll
the
second.
I'll make the motion to approve BZA's case number SV 200501 for the 0.3 feet left building setback variance as submitted.
Second.
Who seconded it, please?
Mr. Foley.
Mr. Foley, gotcha. All right, Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. LaBeouf,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Foley,
Yes.
Mr. Jarman.
Yes. Congratulations. Your variance request is approved. You have 180 days to pull your permit.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right, ladies and gents, that was a long one.
Was.
It was fun. Not.
Always is, yes. Well, I guess we're going to close this May 7th, 2020 BZA virtual meeting.
Thank you.